This story is about me discovering after my husband's death that he's actually alive. His death was faked, and I get caught in a dangerous financial crime network, becoming a target while uncovering the shocking truth. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe. Get ready for real emotional and thrilling stories from Black adults that will keep you hooked till the end. 2 hours had passed since the funeral ended, but time didn't feel real anymore. I didn't go home after they lowered the coffin into the ground. I stayed in my car parked across the cemetery, staring through the windshield as people slowly disappeared. The sky waskery, heavy, like it knew something I didn't. My hands rested on the steering wheel, but I couldn't turn the key. I felt like if I moved even an inch, the truth would finally reach me and break whatever was still holding me together. Daniel was gone, my husband, my partner. The man whose voice used to calm me even on my worst days, at least. That's what everyone kept telling me. The image of his coffin wouldn't leave my mind. The sound of dirt hitting the wood echoed in my ears over and over again. Each thud felt like it landed directly on my chest. I had cried so much that my eyes burned. Yet my tears had suddenly stopped, as if my body had decided it couldn't handle any more pain. I kept my wedding ring on. I hadn't even considered taking it off. Removing it felt more permanent than the grave itself. People said things like, "He's in a better place, and you're strong, Emily." I nodded. I thanked them. I smiled. When I was supposed to, but inside nothing made sense. Daniel didn't die like this. Not suddenly, not without warning. He was careful, thoughtful, always 3 steps ahead. That was who he was even in ordinary life. Especially in ordinary life. The wind shook the trees near the cemetery, snapping me out of my thoughts. I leaned my head back against the seat and closed my eyes, hoping just for a second that this was all some horrible misunderstanding. That's when my phone rang. The sound sliced through the silence so sharply that I jumped. My heart began pounding as I looked down at the screen, half expecting to see Daniel's name somehow glowing back at me. Instead, it read, "Dr. Harris." My breath caught. Why would Daniel's doctor call me now? The funeral was over. The paperwork was signed, everything was finished. I hesitated before answering. Something deep in my chest tightened, like a warning. I couldn't explain. "Hello?" My voice sounded unfamiliar, thin, fragile. "Emily," Dr. Harris said. His tone was serious. Too serious. "I need you to come to the hospital immediately." I sat up straight. Is something wrong? There was a pause. Not a long one, but long enough to scare me. "This isn't something I can explain over the phone," he continued. "Please, come as soon as you can." My fingers curled tightly around the phone. "This is about Daniel, isn't it?" Another pause. "Yes," he said quietly. The word echoed in my head. Daniel. My throat went dry. "But the funeral just ended," I whispered. What could possibly be left to discuss? "I know this is difficult," Dr. Harris replied, his voice lower now. "But what you believe to be true may not be the full picture." The full picture. Those words sent a chill through me. "Dr. Harris," I said slowly. "Are you saying there's been some kind of mistake?" "I'm saying," he answered carefully, "that you need to come here now." The line went dead before I could ask another question. I stared at my phone for several seconds, my mind racing. My heartbeat felt loud in my ears, uneven, almost painful. I looked back at the cemetery through the windshield. Daniel's grave was still there, fresh, undeniable, and yet something was suddenly wrong. Doctors don't call widows 2 hours after a funeral unless something has gone terribly, impossibly wrong. My hands began to shake. I dropped the phone onto the passenger seat and pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to steady myself. Part of me wanted to scream. Another part wanted to pretend the call never happened. But a small, terrifying voice inside me whispered, what if this isn't over? What if goodbye wasn't real? I started the car. As I pulled away from the cemetery, one thought followed me like a shadow. After a funeral, there shouldn't be any questions left. So why did it suddenly feel like everything was just beginning? Asterisk, the hospital smelled the same way it always did, clean, sharp, and strangely cold, but that night, it felt different, heavier, like the walls themselves were holding secrets. As soon as I stepped into the corridor, I saw him, Michael Reed. For a moment, I thought grief had finally broken my mind. My heart slammed against my ribs as if trying to escape. I stopped walking, my shoes frozen against the tile floor. It couldn't be him. Not here, not tonight. Michael was sitting on a bench near the far wall, his elbows resting on his knees, his hands clasped together. He looked older than I remembered, tired. There were faint lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, and his hair was darker now, cut shorter, more severe. But the moment he looked up, I knew. That face was burned into a chapter of my life I had buried on purpose. I hadn't spoken his name in years, not out loud, not even in my thoughts. Michael Reed belonged to a past I had locked away back when my marriage was new, when Andrew was still alive. When nothing felt as fragile as it did now, Michael had once been Andrew's closest friend, closer than family. They shared everything late night. Calls, private jokes, secrets I was never meant to hear. And then one day, without explanation, Michael disappeared from our lives. Andrew never talked about it. And I learned not to ask. My chest tightened as I took a slow step forward. Michael stood up when he saw me, hesitation written all over his face. Our eyes met, and the air between us felt charged, dangerous. "Sarah," he said quietly. Hearing my name in his voice sent a sharp ache through me. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat closed, and my thoughts tangled together in confusion and disbelief. Before I could speak, Dredaris appeared beside me. His expression was calm, but his eyes carried a weight that made my stomach drop. "Sarah?" He said softly, guiding me a few steps away from the corridor traffic. "There's something you need to know." I glanced back at Michael. He looked away as if he already knew what was coming. Drrrr is lowered his voice. "The body that was buried today, they're Three's rubble." The words didn't register at first. "A problem?" I repeated. "What kind of problem?" My heart skipped a beat, then another. I suddenly felt lightheaded, like the floor beneath me had shifted. "We've received new information," Dr. Harris continued carefully. "Information that raises serious questions about the identity of the body." I shook my head. "No, that's not possible. I saw him. I identified him." Dr. Harris didn't argue. He didn't correct me. And that silence terrified me more than any explanation could have. Michael stepped closer. "Sarah." "I'm so sorry," he said. I turned on him sharply. "What are you doing here?" My voice cracked. "You vanished. You didn't come to the funeral. You didn't even call. And now you're standing here Lassabi belong in this nightmare?" His jaw tightened. "I didn't come because I wasn't allowed to." "Allowed?" I laughed bitterly. "By who?" He hesitated. That was all the answer I needed to know something was very wrong. Dr. Harris cleared his throat. "We need to talk privately." He led me into a small consultation room. The door closed behind us with a soft click that sounded far too final. Dr. Harris placed a folder on the desk but didn't open it. "Sarah," he said, choosing his words carefully, "the remains we examined do not fully match Andrew's medical records." My breath caught in my chest. "What does that mean?" I whispered. "It means," he said slowly, "that the man you buried may not have been your husband." The room seemed to tilt. I grabbed the edge of the chair to steady myself, my mind screaming in protest. "That's impossible," I said. "I watched my life end today." Michael's voice came from behind me, low and tense. "No," he said. "You watched someone else's." I turned toward him, my heart pounding with fear and anger. "If that wasn't Andrew?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Then where is my husband?" No one answered, and in that silence I understood something terrible. Andrew hadn't just disappeared. He had been erased, and whatever had brought Michael Reed back into my life. It wasn't over yet. The report sat on the desk in front of me, crisp, official, and impossibly final. I could barely focus on the words. My fingers trembled as I reached for the folder, and when I finally opened it, my eyes scanned the text and froze. "This body. It's not Andrew's." The words echoed in my head, repeated, shouting. I could almost hear the coffin lid slam shut again. Only this time it wasn't outside in the cemetery, it was inside me. My knees threatened to give out, but I remained standing, gripping the edge of the consultation table for balance. A roaring filled my ears, drowning out everything else. The soft hum of the hospital lights, the distant footsteps in the corridor, the even professional tone of Dr. Harris. It all faded into static as the truth, or at least what they called the truth, smashed into me. I couldn't cry. My body refused. My tears had dried during the funeral, leaving a hollow ache where my grief should have been. My throat constricted, but no sound came out. It was like my mind and body were negotiating a truce. I could feel pain, yes, but I couldn't release it. So, who did I bury? I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. It trembled as if even my vocal cords couldn't handle the weight of the question. Michael Reed shifted slightly, avoiding my gaze. His eyes, normally so expressive, now held a shadow I had never seen before. He looked older, heavier, not with age, but with the burden of a truth he couldn't have imagined telling me under normal circumstances. Someone who was forced to die in Andrew's place, he said finally, his voice low, measured. They chose him. Or maybe he had no choice at all. The words made my stomach twist. The world seemed to pivot, tilting sideways. The thought that Andrew's death was orchestrated? That someone else had been used to fool the world and me was more than I could process. My mind spun, trying to piece it together. I remembered the funeral, the weeping, the solemn faces of friends and family. I remembered lowering Andrew, or what I thought was Andrew, into the ground. I remembered the smell of fresh earth, the heavy silence, and the soft drizzle that had fallen like the sky itself was mourning. All of it had been a lie. I sank into the chair, burying my face in my hands. Why? I whispered. Why would anyone do this? Michael finally looked at me, his gaze sharp and unflinching. Because he was in danger, Sarah, and because someone powerful wanted the world to believe he was gone. I lifted my head, staring at him through a haze of disbelief and anger. Danger? Andrew? Was my husband in danger, and no one told me? Not just in danger, Michael said. He was being hunted. They needed him out of sight and using someone else was their solution. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt trapped under an invisible weight. The room seemed to shrink. Around me, every sound outside, the beeping monitors, the murmur of nurses was a distant echo. It was just me, Michael, and the unbearable truth. Dr. Harris cleared his throat. Sarah, the DNA results are conclusive. We've double-checked everything. It's not Andrew. The finality of it made me shiver. The word conclusive struck like a hammer. There was no room for debate, no chance to rationalize it. My world had been turned inside out. Michael leaned closer, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. They forced someone to take his place. They made it look like he died, so no one would come looking for him. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't fate. It was a crime. The word crime rolled over me, heavy and suffocating. My mind struggled. To hold on to anything familiar. The coffin, the funeral, the tears, the goodbye, they were all part of a lie. A criminal deception so precise it had fooled everyone, including me. I felt a surge of something sharp and bitter rise inside me. Rage? Betrayal? Confusion? Perhaps all three at once. I clenched my fists, knuckles white, as if gripping something tangible could keep me grounded in a world that had just collapsed. Then he's alive, I said, almost as if the words themselves would summon the truth. Andrew, he's still alive. Michael nodded slowly. Yes, alive, but that doesn't mean he's safe. Not yet, and this revelation, it's dangerous. You need to be careful. I pressed my palms to my face, closing my eyes. My entire life, everything I thought I knew had been built on a lie. I had grieved. I had mourned. I had buried someone who wasn't even him. And now the reality was more terrifying than anything I could have imagined. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't fate. This wasn't outrage DY. It was a crime. A calculated, deliberate, cold-blooded crime. And somewhere in the shadows of that hospital, the people who had orchestrated it were still out there, watching, waiting, ensuring. Their secret remained buried. My hands shook on the desk, my mind racing. I didn't know if I was more afraid of what had happened or of what was coming next, because now I realized I wasn't just a widow. I was a witness. I was a target. And the truth, the unbearable truth, was only just beginning to unravel. I couldn't breathe. Not fully. Not yet. The words Dr. Harris had just spoken felt like icy water poured straight into my lungs, freezing me from the inside out. Andrew faked his death. He said again, slowly, deliberately, as if repeating it would make it easier for me to grasp. I stared at him blankly, my mind struggling to hold on to something solid, anything solid, but there was nothing. Only shards. Broken pieces of a life I thought I had known. Wait a second, I managed, my voice hoarse and trembling. You mean my husband, the man I buried today, is he alive? He's alive? Yes, Dr. Harris said, keeping. His eyes calm, his tone professional. But there was a weight behind it, a gravity I could feel pressing down on me. And not just alive, he's in danger. That's why this had to happen. I sank into the chair, gripping the edge of the desk as though it were the only thing keeping me tethered to the floor. My head was spinning. My thoughts scattered in every direction. I wanted to scream, to cry, to do anything, but no sound would come out. My throat was tight, raw from the grief I had already poured into that funeral. Andrew. Alive, and I had. Been made to believe otherwise. D.D.R. Harris leaned forward. You need to understand something. Sarah, Andrew has been part of a federal financial crime investigation for months now, years even. He was uncovering a network so powerful it could manipulate outcomes, destroy evidence, and manipulate death itself. I blinked, trying to process it. My husband, a man I thought I had fully known, was not just a banker, not just a husband. He was walking into a war one had no idea existed, and somehow I had been kept completely in the dark. But why? I whispered. Why would he fake his own death? Why keep me from knowing? Dar Harris sighed. Because he thought it was the only way to keep you safe. The people he was investigating. They wouldn't hesitate to hurt anyone close to him. You, me, family, friends. That's why he made the decision himself. The words barely registered. My hands were shaking uncontrollably now. I pressed them to my face, trying to hold back tears I hadn't cried at the funeral. Anger and betrayal began to rise in their place. He decided I shouldn't know? I asked, my voice trembling. He decided I should mourn someone who wasn't even dead. Yes, D.D.R. Harris said quietly. He thought it was the only way to protect you, but he also underestimated, well, the consequences. The truth always finds a way out. The room seemed to tilt, the air thick and suffocating. I realized something in that moment. The man I thought I had lost forever, I hadn't lost him. But the person I thought I had been married to, my Andrew, had been hiding a life, a lie. So deep that I had no clue who he really was. My chest tightened, my stomach churned. I had not only buried my husband, I had buried the truth unknowingly and left myself vulnerable in ways I hadn't even imagined. And I hesitated, my voice trembling as I forced the next words out. And he thought keeping me in the dark was protection? D.R. Harris nodded. Yes, but sometimes the ones we try to protect the most, the secrets we keep for them, those are the things that hurt them the most. I swallowed hard. Every memory of our marriage flashed through my mind. The late nights, the quiet dinners, the smiles, the promises, all of it now felt like it was painted over something darker, a reality I hadn't seen. A secret life, carefully hidden beneath every ordinary moment. He hadn't just faked his death. He had hidden the investigation, hidden the danger, hidden the fact that he had made me grieve a life I thought I had lost while the real threat had been right there. Closer than I knew, I felt a sharp surge of emotion, anger, betrayal, fear, all tangled together. I wanted to run, to leave the room, to scream at the sky, to shake Andrew until he admitted he had lied. But I couldn't, not yet, because the more D.D.R. Harris explained, the more I realized something else. This was bigger than grief, bigger than my heartbreak, bigger than Andrew himself. The web he was caught in. It had teeth. And anyone who tried to step into the light now could get hurt. And the decision to not tell me, I said finally, my voice quiet but filled with resolve, that was his alone? Yes, Dr. Harris replied. He believed it was the only way to keep you alive. But it also means you're not just mourning, you're awakening, and now you have to act. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in hours, maybe days, I let myself feel the weight of the truth fully. I hadn't just lost a husband. I had lost certainty. I had lost innocence. I had lost the life I thought I knew. But in that same moment, I realized something else. I hadn't lost myself. And if Andrew had faked his death, if this lie had been the foundation of our marriage, then it was up to me to uncover the rest of the truth, because the life I thought I had lived had been built on a lie. And now it was my turn to rewrite it. That night, the hospital seemed darker than usual. Even under the harsh fluorescent lights, shadows stretched long across the walls, creeping along the floor as if they were alive. I couldn't stop thinking about the DNA report, about the coffin, about the person I had buried and the one who was supposedly still alive. I barely noticed Michael Reed's presence at first. He had been standing quietly near the corner of the room watching me as I struggled to process Dr. Harris's words. But then he moved closer and I realized something chilling. He wasn't just a bystander, not just Andrew's friend. He was something else entirely. I need to tell you something. Sarah, Michael said, his voice low, careful, but carrying a weight that made my stomach twist. Something you weren't supposed to know yet. I turned to him, eyes wide. What is it? He took a deep breath. I wasn't just Andrew's friend. I was his undercover handler. I was placed in his life to monitor, to guide, and if necessary, protect him from the people he was investigating, from the network he stumbled into, and from himself. The words hit me like a fist to the chest. My head spun. I felt like I couldn't breathe, like the walls were closing in on. You were what? I whispered, shaking my head, as if saying it aloud might undo the meaning of the words. Michael's gaze didn't falter. An undercover handler. That's why I disappeared. That's why you never saw me at the funeral. I had to remain invisible. You weren't supposed to know. Invisible. I felt the word claw at my chest. Everything had been designed to keep me safe, but safe? It didn't feel safe. It felt like I'd been trapped in someone else's carefully constructed nightmare, and then came the part that nearly made me collapse. Michael leaned closer. Sarah, Andrew believed that if he discovered the truth about his fake death, he paused. He feared someone would come for you. He feared they would kill you. My hands flew to my face. My pulse thundered in my ears. Kill me? I barely breathed the words. Andrew, he thought I would be murdered? Michael nodded. He did. And that's why this has to remain quiet, at least until he was ready or until we can make sure you were safe. I backed away from him, my mind spinning, trying to make sense of it all. My husband had faked his death to protect me. The man I thought I had lost forever had been orchestrating this entire lie not just for himself, but for me. And now it felt like the walls of my entire life were collapsing. Then my phone vibrated. I looked down at the screen, expecting a message from Dr. Harris, but the sender was unknown. And the message. It froze my blood. You were never supposed to survive the funeral. My fingers trembled so violently, but I dropped the phone onto the floor. It bounced once and landed screen down, a harsh, metallic thud that seemed to echo through the room. I fell back against the wall, my legs weak, my heart hammering. I couldn't comprehend the words. Not fully. Never supposed to survive. The idea that someone had planned for my death, and that I had actually lived. It made my skin crawl. Every instinct screamed that I needed to run, hide, do something, anything. But what could I do when the danger was invisible, omnipresent, and orchestrated by people I didn't even understand yet? Michael crouched down to pick up my phone and handed it back to me without saying a word. His eyes were grave. Sarah, this isn't a coincidence. Someone wanted you gone tonight, and they're still out there. I clutched the phone as if holding it tightly would protect me from the thought of death stalking me just hours after my husband's funeral. I felt my legs start to shake uncontrollably. Tears threatened to spill, but I forced them back. I couldn't cry anymore, not now. Not when I needed to think. Who would do this? I asked, my voice barely audible. Michael's jaw tightened. The network Andrew was investigating. Powerful people. People who don't make mistakes. They knew about the funeral, about the coffin. They wanted to make sure no one knew he was alive. And now they've realized you know too much. I swallowed hard. The world tilted. Every step I thought I had taken, every moment I believed, I understood had been a lie. My husband had disappeared, yes, but not because he wanted to leave me. He had vanished because his life, and now mine, was a chessboard for forces I didn't even understand. The message on my phone pulsed like a warning. Someone had been inside my life, watching, planning, waiting for me to act or die. And suddenly, the weight of it all hit me. I wasn't just a widow. I wasn't just someone grieving a husband who had faked his death. I was a target. a target who had survived by luck, by fate, by some twist of the universe, and surviving was not enough. I couldn't sit back and pretend to be safe. Not anymore. I looked up at Michael, my hands still trembling. What do we do now? He didn't answer immediately. He just looked at me, and in his eyes I saw something I hadn't expected. Determination. A plan, a resolve to face whatever was coming next. I swallowed hard and nodded, trying to steady my breath. One thing was clear, the funeral had been a lie, the coffin had been a lie. The death of my husband had been a lie, and tonight the truth had come for me. I clenched my fists. I wouldn't be anyone's victim, not now, not ever. I would survive, and I would find Andrew. * Detective Miller. Didn't soften his words. He didn't try to comfort me or ease the truth into something gentler. He looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Sarah, you're not just a witness anymore. You're a target." The word settled in my chest like a stone. Target. It meant the rules had changed. It meant whatever protection I thought I had vanished the moment that message appeared on my phone. It meant someone out there had already decided I was a problem that needed to be solved. Miller explained it calmly, professionally, like he was describing the weather. They know you've been to the hospital. They know you spoke to Dr. Harris. And if they know that much, they know you're getting close to the truth. Close to the truth. That night, I went home anyway. I told myself I needed familiarity, something normal. But the moment I pulled into my driveway, I felt an unease crawling up my spine. I turned off the engine and sat in the darkness. Listening, that's when I saw it. A dark sedan rolled slowly past my house. No headlights, no rush, just WATCHINGA. Few minutes later, it passed again, and then a third time. Each pass was slower than the last. My heart pounded so hard I was sure it would give me away. I stayed perfectly still, barely breathing, watching through the narrow gap between the curtains. Whoever was inside that car didn't stop. They didn't knock. They didn't need to. They wanted me to know they were there. When the car finally disappeared down the street, my legs nearly gave out. I locked every door, every window. I turned off the lights and stood in the hallway, wrapped in silence. This was no longer grief. This was fear. I walked into the bathroom and turned on the light. The mirror reflected a woman I barely recognized. Her eyes were sharp now, alert, scanning, alive. The woman who had collapsed at the funeral, who had clung to the coffin like it was the last thing holding her together, was gone. That woman didn't exist anymore. If Andrew was alive, if he was hiding somewhere in the shadows of this nightmare, then I refused to be the weak point. I refused to be the reason he stayed buried in lies. I stared at my reflection and whispered, "You don't get to break me twice." My phone vibrated. A message from Detective Miller. Do not leave the house. We're increasing surveillance. I let out a bitter laugh. My life had turned into a crime scene overnight. Michael arrived an hour later. He didn't knock. He tapped twice, soft-coded. When I opened the door, he scanned the street before stepping inside. "They've made their move," he said quietly. "That car wasn't random. So this is it?" I asked. "This is what my life is now?" "For now," he replied. "But only if you let them control it." I felt anger flare in my chest, hot and sharp. "They don't get to decide." Michael studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "That's what Andrew said too." Hearing Andrew's name still hurt, but it also gave me strength. He hadn't faked his death because he was weak. He had done it because he believed. Survival was the only way to win, and now survival was my responsibility. 2. Michael spread a few documents across the table. Bank records, shell companies. Names that meant nothing to me yet, but they would. "This is what Andrew was working on," he said. "And now it's yours." I looked down at the papers, then back up at him. "If I do this," I said, "there's no going back." "There never was," he answered. That was the moment everything shifted. I wasn't a widow anymore. I wasn't just someone who had been lied to. I was involved. I was hunted. And I was awake. I went back to the mirror one last time before bed. The fear was still there. I wouldn't pretend otherwise. But beneath it was something stronger. Resolve. Clarity. If Andrew were alive, then I would stay alive too. Not just to survive, but to reach the truth. Because someone had tried to erase my husband. Someone had planned my death, and they had failed. Now it was my turn to make sure they never forgot that mistake. When I finally saw Andrew, the world didn't stop the way I had imagined it would. There was no dramatic rush of relief, no tears of reunion, no moment where everything suddenly made sense. Instead, there was silence, heavy, unforgiving. He was. A live dot standing just a few feet away from me in a dimly lit safe house. Breathing, really, yet something about him felt unfamiliar. His eyes met mine, but they weren't the eyes I remembered. They were cautious, guarded, as if he were looking at someone he loved. And someone he feared at the same time. That's when I understood something painful and undeniable. Some fake deaths aren't just meant to fool enemies. Sometimes, they're meant to protect the people closest to you by keeping them at a distance. Andrew disappeared not only from the world, but from me. He looked thinner, older, like every day he had spent hiding had carved something away from the man I once knew. I searched his face for the husband I had buried, the man whose coffin I had clung to, the man I had mourned as if my own life had ended with his. But the Andrew standing in front of me was different, alive, but changed. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. The words cut deeper than any confession could have. I took a slow step forward. My heart was pounding, but my voice was steady when I spoke. "You left me to die, Andrew." He flinched, not physically, but in his eyes. For a brief moment, the wall he had built cracked. "I never wanted you hurt," he said, "and yet," I replied, "you let the world believe I was expendable. You let them plan my death." Silence fell between. Use again. In that silence, I realized something else. Andrew had made a choice. Not just to fake his death, but to decide my fate without my consent. To gamble with my grief, my safety, my life because he believed he knew best. I remembered the funeral. The cold weight of the earth. The lies wrapped in sympathy and black clothing. I remembered the woman I was that day, broken, gasping for air, begging reality to make sense. That woman didn't stand in front of Andrew now. This one did. "I buried you," I said quietly. "I buried you because I trusted you. Because I believed you would never lie to me in a way that destroyed me." His eyes dropped to the floor. "I thought distance would protect you," he whispered. "No," I said. "It protected you." The truth hung between us, raw, sharp, undeniable. I understood now. Fake deaths weren't always about survival. Sometimes they were about control. About deciding who deserved the truth and who didn't. About drawing lines between danger and love, even when those lines cut straight through the people you claimed to protect. I took a step back and exhaled slowly. "I'm not here to beg you to come home," I said. "And I'm not here to forgive you." Andrew looked up, startled. "I'm here because your choices made me a target," I continued. "Because someone tried to erase me. Because your silence put blood on the ground. That shouldn't have been there." He opened his mouth to speak, but I raised my hand. "I'm not the victim of this story," I said firmly. "And I'm not just its witness either." Something shifted inside me as I said the words, something solid, unmovable. "I'm the one who decides how this ends." Andrew stared at me, finally understanding that the woman before him was not the one he had left behind. The grief was still there, yes, but it no longer owned me. I turned toward the door, my decision made. "If justice comes," I said, "it won't come because you hid well. It'll come because I refuse to stay silent." I didn't wait for his response as I walked away. I felt something I hadn't felt since before the funeral, clarity. I wasn't chasing him anymore. I wasn't mourning him anymore. I was choosing myself, and for the first time since that coffin touched the ground, I knew exactly who I was, not the victim of this story. Not just its witness, but its justice. I finally handed over the evidence to Detective Miller. Every document, every shred of proof, every hidden transaction that traced Andrew's fake death, the financial crime network, and the internal conspiracy was all there, laid out in black and white. Years of secrets, lies, and manipulation were now staring at the light. Unable to hide any longer, Michael Reed's testimony sealed it. His insider knowledge, combined with the concrete evidence, made the case undeniable. There was no room for doubt. Andrew's death had been faked, but it hadn't been an act of malice. It had been a decision. A wrong decision, yes, but one that had put countless lives at risk, including my own. I watched as the authorities moved quickly. Andrew was taken into protective custody. Alive, yes, but for the first time in years, he could no longer evade the law, no longer hide behind shadows or lies. He had to face the consequences of the choices he had made. And I finally could face the truth without fear. Courtroom after courtroom, the story unfolded. The evidence laid bare the criminal network Andrew had been investigating the shell. Companies, the corrupt officials, the people willing to buy death like it was merchandise. Each revelation drew gasps, disbelief, and awe. And through it all, I stayed silent, calm, collected, but burning inside with the knowledge that I had survived when so many had been manipulated, silenced, or destroyed. And then the hardest moment came. Andrew was brought before me in the courtroom, alive, standing there, eyes wary, shoulders tense. The man I had buried in my mind for 2 hours, the man I thought I had lost forever, was real, but now he was a stranger. I looked at him. Really looked. Andrew, I said, my voice steady, even though my heart was hammering in my chest. You kept me from the truth in the name of protection. You deprived me of the knowledge I had every right to. And that, I paused, letting the words sink in. That was your greatest crime. He didn't speak. He couldn't. There was guilt, yes, but there was also relief, I think, that I had not turned into Samion unrecognizable, that I was. Still me, strong enough to face him, strong enough to demand justice. Outside the courtroom, the network crumbled. One by one, those responsible were caught, tried, and convicted. The corrupt officials, the financiers, the manipulators, none of them could hide forever. Every lie they had built, every scheme they had orchestrated, collapsed under the weight of evidence, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Freedom. Real, undeniable freedom, not the kind that comes from a simple escape. Not the kind that comes from running or hiding, but the kind that comes from reclaiming control over your own life. From speaking the truth, refuse to let fear or manipulation dictate your existence. Andrew's presence was still there, lingering like a shadow, but it no longer controlled me. I didn't need him to validate my survival, my courage, or my choices. I had chosen to live. I had chosen to fight. And that choice is mine alone. The story wasn't over because Andrew had survived. It wasn't over because the criminals had been caught. It wasn't over because the courtroom had delivered justice. It was over because I refused to be silent. I stepped out of the courthouse for the first time in months. Sunlight hitting my face, cool air filling my lungs. I felt the weight of fear lift, replaced with clarity, strength, and resolve. I realized something important. Truth cannot be buried. No matter how carefully someone plans it, no matter how convincing the lies, the truth always finds its way to the surface, and once it does, it has to be lived. I walked away from the courthouse and didn't look back, because this time I wasn't walking away from grief. I wasn't walking away from betrayal. I wasn't walking away from danger. I was walking toward life, toward the future I refused to let anyone steal from me, toward the justice I had fought so hard to reclaim. For the first time, I truly understood. Surviving isn't enough. Knowing the truth isn't enough. You have to live it. You have to own it. And I had been a widow, a witness, a pawn. But now I was something else. I was the justice story deserved. And no one, not Andrew, not the network, not the lies could take that from me. Truth wasn't just revealed. It wasn't just exposed. It was alive. And so was I.